A strange request. John was just finishing his evening coffee when he heard a knock at the door. It was strange because he rarely got visitors on this space station. He lived alone, working as a mechanic, fixing old cargo ships that passed through. Life was simple, quiet, boring. The knock came again. Sharp, urgent. John sighed, placing his mug down. He walked over and pressed the panel to open the door. Outside stood Zyra, his new alien maid. She was soaking wet. John's eyes widened in surprise. Her smooth blue skin was dripping, her white uniform clinging to her tall, slender frame. Her black eyes, large and glowing faintly, stared at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Zyra took a deep breath and said, "Human, you must wash me." John blinked. Did he hear that right? "What?" he asked, sure he misunderstood. "You must wash me," Zyra repeated, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Her voice was calm but serious. John frowned. "Oh, why?" Zyra hesitated, glancing left and right as if checking for something. Then she stepped inside, water dripping onto the floor. Hey. John backed up as she moved closer. "You're getting my floor all wet." "This is more important than your floor," she said. John was confused. He had hired Zyra a few weeks ago, through the station's work exchange program. Many aliens worked as cleaners or helpers in human sections of the station. Zyra was quiet, efficient, and never caused trouble. Until now. "Okay, listen," John said, rubbing his temples. "Why do you need me to wash you? Can't you just take a shower?" Zyra shook her head. "I cannot. I am not allowed." John narrowed his eyes. "Not allowed by who?" "My kind," she said simply. John stared at her, waiting for more explanation. When she gave none, he sighed. "All right, let me get you a towel." "No." Zyra's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. Her fingers were cold but soft, and where they touched, John felt a strange tingling sensation. He pulled back instinctively. "You cannot dry me," she said firmly. "I must be washed first." John did not like this. Something was wrong. "Zyra," he said slowly, "I don't know what kind of alien rule this is, but I'm not washing you. I'm your employer, not your, I don't know, your personal spa assistant." Zyra's expression didn't change, but her hands clenched at her sides. "If I dry like this, something bad will happen." John's heart skipped a beat. The way she said it, it sounded like a warning. "What kind of bad?" he asked. Zyra hesitated again. This time, she looked nervous. "I cannot tell you." John groaned, running a hand through his hair. "Great, you want me to wash you, but you won't tell me why." "That's not suspicious at all. I would not ask if it was not important," Zyra said. She stepped closer, and John could see tiny glowing patterns on her skin, symbols that seemed to shift under the water. He had never noticed them before. Maybe they only appeared when she was wet. John sighed. "Zyra, I don't know anything about your species. What if I do something wrong?" "You will not," she said. John raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? And how do you know that?" Zyra hesitated. "Because my kind has rules. Only a human can wash me." John froze. That made no sense. "Wait, only a human?" Zyra nodded. John did not like this at all. "Zyra, that's crazy. There are thousands of species in this station. You mean to tell me, out of all of them, only humans can do this?" "Yes." "Why?" Zyra did not answer. John took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. This was officially the strangest conversation he had ever had. He was just a mechanic. He fixed ships, not washed aliens. "Okay, let's say I believe you," he said. "How exactly am I supposed to wash you?" "With your hands," Zyra said, as if it was obvious. John blinked. "Wait. What?" No towels, no sponges, only water and your hands, Zyra repeated. John felt weird. He wasn't sure why, but something about this made his stomach twist. This wasn't just a simple request. There was something deeper going on. And Zyra wasn't telling him everything. John exhaled, rubbing his face. This is insane. You must decide quickly, Zyra said, her voice urgent now. I am already starting to dry. John looked at her. Water was still dripping, but her skin was changing. The glow in her symbols was flickering. Her hands trembled slightly. She was scared. John could see it now. And that was the only reason he didn't slam the door in her face. Against his better judgment, John muttered, Fine. But if this is some kind of alien prank, I swear. It is not, Zyra interrupted. John took a deep breath. All right, let's get this over with. As he reached for the sink, he had no idea what he was getting himself into. A forbidden rule. John stood in his small kitchen, staring at the running water in the sink. His hands hovered over the stream, as if they were about to commit a crime. Behind him, Zyra stood perfectly still, her glowing blue skin still wet, her large black eyes fixed on him. He exhaled slowly. So let me get this straight. You're telling me I, a human, have to wash you with my bare hands, using only water, and if I don't, something bad will happen. Zyra gave a single, slow nod. John rubbed his temples. You realize how crazy this sounds, right? It is not crazy, Zyra replied in her calm, almost emotionless voice. But John had known her long enough to notice the slight tremor in her words. She was nervous. That made him nervous. John turned off the water and turned around to face her. Okay, before I do this, I need some real answers. No more vague alien riddles. He crossed his arms. What happens if you dry without being washed? Zyra hesitated. She looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers, watching the tiny glowing symbols flicker under her wet skin. It is against our nature. John frowned. What does that even mean? She sighed, as if frustrated by his lack of understanding. My species does not cleanse ourselves. We are not allowed. Not allowed by who? Our ancestors. Our law. It has always been this way. John gave her a skeptical look. So, your people have a rule that says you can't wash yourselves, and you just obey it. Zyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. It is not a choice. It is how we are made. John narrowed his eyes. How they were made. Something about the way she said it sent a strange shiver down his spine. Okay, so if you can't wash yourselves, how do you stay clean? We must be cleansed by others. John stared at her. You mean like a bathhouse or something? She shook her head. It is only allowed in private. By another. Never alone. John ran a hand through his hair. All right. That's weird, but fine. So why does it have to be me? Why a human? Zyra hesitated again. Because only humans are neutral. John's eyebrows shot up. Neutral? What does that mean? Zyra took a small step forward. Most species have energy signatures that are too strong. If they touch us while we are wet, it can cause reactions, dangerous ones. John's breath caught in his throat. Reactions. Zyra nodded. We absorb energy through contact with water. If the energy is too much, we cannot control the effect. John took a step back. Wait. You absorb energy. From touch. Yes. John's stomach twisted. And what happens if the wrong person washes you? Zyra's glowing eyes locked onto his. Either I take too much, or they do. Silence filled the room. John swallowed hard. So, if I wasn't human and I touched you right now, you could drain me. She nodded. Or you could drain me. It is unpredictable. That is why only humans are safe. You are balanced. John shook his head in disbelief. This was insane. This wasn't just some weird cultural rule. This was something biological, something dangerous, And yet, he couldn't ignore the look on Zira's face. She was scared. "Zira," he said slowly, "what happens if I don't wash you?" She looked down at her hands again, flexing her fingers like they were already going numb. "Then my body will begin to shut down." John's chest tightened. "Shut down? Like, you'll get sick?" Zira hesitated, then whispered, "Like I will cease." John's heart dropped. "Cease?" Zira's black eyes met his. "Yes." John's mouth went dry. "You mean, you'll die?" She gave a slow nod. John felt the air leave his lungs. "You've got to be kidding me." "It is the law of my kind. If we dry without being cleansed, our bodies cannot continue." John ran a hand through his hair. This wasn't just some odd custom. This was life or death. And it was on him. He clenched his jaw. "How long do we have?" Zira glanced at the dim symbols on her arms. "Minutes." John's pulse spiked. "Minutes? You waited until you were almost dead to tell me this." "I was hoping I would not have to," she admitted. John groaned. "You're impossible." He turned the sink back on, watching the water rush out. "Fine. Let's do this." Zira stepped closer, her movements graceful but tense. She extended her hands toward him. John took a deep breath, then reached out. The moment his fingers touched her skin, heat surged through his body. It was like touching a live wire, but instead of pain, it was a pull, like something deep inside him was being drawn toward her. Zira gasped. Her body shivered under his touch, her glowing patterns flickering brighter. John froze. "Zira, what's happening?" Her breathing was heavy. "It has begun." John felt something strange inside him, like his energy was being gently siphoned away. Then Zira stumbled forward, her wet skin pressing against his hands. John's vision blurred for a moment, and he felt like he was falling. Zira gasped again. Her eyes glowed brighter. John's pulse raced. Something was very, very wrong. The first touch. John's hands trembled as he held onto Zira's arms, her wet, glowing skin pulsing under his fingers. The moment he touched her, a strange warmth surged through his body, spreading from his fingertips up to his chest. It wasn't painful, just intense. Zira gasped, her head tilting back slightly. Her breathing was sharp, almost like she was fighting something inside herself. John's pulse raced. "Zira, what's happening?" Her black eyes snapped to his, glowing softly like liquid night. You are doing it correctly." John wasn't sure what he was doing, but the energy flowing between them felt alive, like a silent conversation their bodies were having without words. He tried to focus. "All right, just tell me what to do." Zira took a deep breath, her hands shaking. "Take the water and spread it on me." John turned to the sink, running his hands under the cold stream before touching Zira's shoulders again. This time, he moved slowly, rubbing the water onto her skin. Her body shuddered at his touch. John hesitated. "Did I hurt you?" Zira shook her head quickly. "No, keep going." He continued, spreading the water down her arms, across her forearms, and over her fingers. The symbols on her skin began to shift, their soft glow growing brighter. John watched in fascination as the alien markings moved like living tattoos, rearranging themselves under his fingertips. "What is this?" he asked, brushing his thumb over one of the symbols. Zira inhaled sharply. "They are my essence." John frowned. "Essence?" Zira met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Our bodies are not like yours, human. Our water binds us together. It carries who we are." John raised an eyebrow. "So, you're saying, your skin is reading me?" "In a way." He felt a chill creep down his spine. "And what happens if it doesn't like what it reads?" Zira didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at where his hands touched her wrists. "If my body does not accept you, then the bond will reject you." John stiffened. "Reject me? What does that mean?" She exhaled slowly. Your energy will be drained completely, until there is nothing left. John's stomach dropped. Oh, great. So I could die. Zira nodded once. Yes. John pulled his hands back instantly. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You should have told me that first. You had already started, Zira said softly. There was no turning back. John felt sick. You tricked me. I gave you a choice. He wanted to argue, but deep down, he knew she was right. He had agreed, even if he didn't understand what he was agreeing to. John took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. Fine. What now? Zira's black eyes flickered. You must continue. John groaned but reached for the water again. He scooped up more and let it run over her collarbones, her shoulders, the back of her neck. The moment the water touched her throat, Zira shuddered violently. Her hands gripped his wrists, her nails digging into his skin. John tensed. What? What's wrong? Zira's breath came faster. Her skin glowed brighter. The process. It is moving faster than I expected. What does that mean? Zira swallowed hard, gripping his arms tighter. You are too strong. John's eyes widened. Too strong. I thought humans were supposed to be safe. She shook her head quickly. Safe, yes, but your energy is different. John frowned. Different how? Zira's fingers trembled as she whispered, It is pulling me in. John suddenly felt the energy shift. It wasn't just Zira absorbing from him. He was pulling something from her too. A warmth spread through his chest, creeping up his neck and down his arms. His vision blurred slightly. He could feel Zira. Not just her hands on him, but her emotions, her thoughts. Flashes of memories rushed through his mind. Places he had never been, voices he had never heard, sensations that were not his own. A bright city with silver towers. A deep ocean filled with glowing creatures. A soft voice whispering in a language he didn't understand. John gasped and stumbled back, breaking contact. What the hell was that? Zira's breathing was ragged. Her glowing tattoos flickered wildly, her skin almost vibrating. She stared at him with wide, shocked eyes. You saw, she whispered. John's mind spun. I don't even know what I saw. Zira looked at him like he had just spoken an impossible truth. That should not have happened. John wiped his face with a shaky hand. Yeah, well, it did. Zira pressed a hand to her chest, her breathing uneven. A connection has started. John's heart pounded. What kind of connection? Zira hesitated, then whispered, A bond. John took a step back. Nope, we're not doing that. I don't even know what that means. Zira's eyes darkened. Neither do I. This was not supposed to happen. John let out a nervous laugh. Great, just fantastic. First, I'm washing an alien. Now I'm soul-bound or whatever the hell is happening. Zira's hands clenched at her sides. This is serious, John. John rubbed his forehead. No kidding. What does this bond do? Zira hesitated, then finally admitted, if it completes, we will become linked. John froze. Linked? Like, I'll be stuck with you. Zira nodded slowly. Yes. John stared at her. For how long? She bit her lip. John's pulse pounded. Zira. How long? She met his eyes, and for the first time, he saw fear in her expression. Forever. John felt the air leave his lungs. Before he could even process what she had just said, a loud knock echoed through his quarters. Bang, bang, bang. A voice shouted from outside. This is station security. Open the door immediately. John's blood ran cold. Zira's glowing tattoos flared brighter, panic flashing in her eyes. They found us. John spun to face her. Who? What the hell did you do? Zira grabbed his wrist. There's no time. We have to go. John yanked his hand away. I don't even know what's happening. Bang, bang. The The door hissed as the security override activated. Zira lunged forward, gripping his face in her wet hands. Her glowing skin sent a final pulse of energy through him. "I'm sorry, John." The door burst open, and everything went black. A dangerous bond. John's world collapsed into darkness the moment Zira touched his face. For a few terrifying seconds, he felt like he was floating in empty space. No air, no sound, just an endless void. But then suddenly, he wasn't alone. Whispers filled his mind. Not words. Not in any language he understood. But feelings, emotions, memories. Zira's memories. Flashes of her past blurred before him. A massive glowing city floating above an alien ocean. A young Zira standing before a circle of elders, their glowing skin forming patterns of light as they judged her. A strange ancient symbol carved into a massive stone pillar. Then, an overwhelming feeling of fear and pain. John gasped, snapping back into reality as if being ripped out of a dream. His body slammed back into himself, his vision blurred, and his head throbbed like someone had shoved a hot iron inside his skull. The moment he opened his eyes, he knew something had changed. He wasn't in his quarters anymore. The room was dark, cold, the air thick with the scent of metal and electricity. He could hear the distant hum of the space station systems running in the background. The soft flickering of dim emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the walls. His hands were tied. "Shit." John groaned, trying to move, but his wrists were locked in some kind of magnetic restraints. His ankles, too. He was strapped into a hard metallic chair in the middle of what looked like an interrogation room. He wasn't alone. Across from him, Zira sat in another chair, restrained just like him. She wasn't glowing anymore. Her markings were dim, her head slumped forward, her breathing slow and uneven. "Zira," John whispered. His throat was dry. His head was still spinning. "Hey, wake up." Zira didn't move. John twisted his wrists, trying to break free, but the restraints didn't budge. Whoever had captured them, they weren't messing around. Then, the door hissed open. A figure stepped inside. John immediately recognized the black and silver uniform. Station security. But this wasn't just any officer. This was Commander Ralvik, the head of station law enforcement. A tall, gray-skinned alien with sharp golden eyes and a face like carved stone. Behind him, 2 armed guards stood at attention, weapons strapped to their sides. Ralvik stared at John and Zira for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he finally spoke. "You have made a very, very dangerous mistake." John swallowed. His voice came out hoarse. "Yeah. You want to be more specific." Ralvik stepped forward, clasping his hands behind his back. His golden eyes locked onto Zira, ignoring John completely. You have violated the law of your own people." John frowned. "What law? What the hell are you talking about?" Ralvik didn't even look at him. "Do you even know what she is?" John clenched his jaw. "She's my maid. And my friend. That's all I know." Ralvik smiled coldly. "No, she is something far worse than that." He finally turned to John, his golden eyes gleaming under the dim lights. "You don't understand, do you?" he said, almost amused. The act you performed, the ritual, was not just a simple cleansing. John's stomach twisted. Then what the hell was it? Ralvik leaned in slightly. It was a binding. John froze. He felt his entire body go cold. "Binding? What do you mean?" Ralvik glanced at Zira, shaking his head. "You truly don't know, do you?" He exhaled slowly. "Her kind, her species, do not cleanse themselves because their bodies are designed to bind to those who touch them in water. It is an ancient instinct, a survival mechanism." John's breath caught in his throat. "Survival mechanism." Ralvik continued. "She wasn't asking you to simply wash her. She was asking you to become her anchor, her bonded one." John's pulse spiked. "What?" Ralvik sighed. You are now connected to her. Your energy, your emotions, your very existence, it is now tied to hers. John shook his head, panic rising in his chest. No, that's not possible. She said it was temporary. Ralvik's expression darkened. She lied. John's heart hammered. His mind raced. He turned to Zira, still slumped in her chair, her breathing shallow. "Zyra," he said, urgently now. "Wake up. Tell me this guy is wrong." Zira stirred slightly. Her weak, glowing tattoos flickered, and she slowly lifted her head. When she opened her eyes, they weren't just black anymore. A faint golden ring shimmered around the edges of her irises. John's stomach dropped. What the hell is happening to me?" he whispered. Zyra's voice was weak but clear. "The bond has started." John's world spun. This couldn't be real. He was just a mechanic, a regular guy. He wasn't supposed to be part of some alien ritual, some cosmic bond that couldn't be undone. Ralvik sighed, shaking his head. "You poor fool," he muttered. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." John's jaw clenched. "Then why don't you tell me?" Ralvik stared at him for a moment before saying something that made John's blood turn to ice. "Because once the bond completes, she will no longer belong to her people." John swallowed. "What does that mean?" Ralvik's golden eyes gleamed. "It means she will belong to you." Silence. John's heart slammed against his ribs. Zira didn't deny it. She didn't even argue. She just stared at him, those strange new golden rings in her eyes glowing softly. Ralvik straightened. "That is why her people will never allow this." John's throat felt dry. "What do you mean?" Ralvik's voice was cold. "They will come for her, and they will kill you both." John felt his entire body go numb. Before he could process it, an alarm blared through the station. "VWOP, VWOP, VWOP." One of the guards checked his communicator. His expression turned to stone. "Sir," the guard said sharply, "we have incoming. Unidentified ships just entered the station's restricted zone." John's breath caught. Ralvik's face darkened. "They're here." Zira's glowing eyes locked onto John's. Soft, apologetic. "I'm sorry," she whispered. John barely had time to react before the station shook violently, and the lights flickered out. The truth revealed. The station shook violently, alarms blaring through the walls. Red emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the metal surfaces. John's heart pounded as he struggled against his restraints, his breathing sharp and fast. Across from him, Zira sat still, her glowing tattoos flickering weakly, the golden rings in her black eyes shimmering like dim stars. "They're here." Ralvik's voice echoed in his mind. "Her people will never allow this. They will kill you both." John gritted his teeth and yanked at the magnetic cuffs holding him to the chair. "Zyra, if you've got any alien magic left in you, now's the time to use it." Zira's eyes flicked to his, and for a moment, she looked torn. "I can't," she whispered. John stared at her. "What do you mean you can't?" Zira's gaze dropped to her hands. "The bond is incomplete. I don't have full access to my abilities yet." Ralvik, who had been standing calmly near the door, let out a sharp breath. "Then we don't have much time." He turned to the two security officers standing near the entrance. "Reinforce the lockdown. No one gets in or out until we know what we're dealing with." One of the guards nodded and moved toward the console on the wall. Before he could press a button, the entire room trembled and the lights flickered again. Then, boom! A massive explosion rocked the station. The wall on the far side of the room shattered inward, sending jagged chunks of metal flying. John barely had time to flinch before the blast of air pressure slammed into him, rattling his skull. The dust settled just enough for him to see figures stepping through the smoke. They moved with silent precision, Their tall, elegant forms shrouded in dark armor, their faces hidden behind smooth silver masks. They carried bladed weapons that pulsed with an eerie blue glow. Zyra's people. John knew it instantly. The moment they saw her, their glowing weapons hummed louder. A silent, unspoken message. She was their target. John felt a surge of protective rage flood through him. "You have 5 seconds," one of the masked figures spoke, their voice smooth and calm, but deadly cold. Zyra's hands clenched into fists. "I won't go with you." The figure tilted their head slightly. "You don't have a choice." John, still strapped to his chair, let out a short, bitter laugh. "Yeah. Well, neither do we, genius. In case you missed it, we're kind of tied up right now." One of the warriors snapped their fingers, and John felt a sudden burning heat against his wrists. A second later, the restraints snapped open. John stumbled forward, catching himself just before he fell. He blinked at his freed hands. "Oh, well, that's convenient." Ralvik, still standing near the ruined wall, remained calm. "You are breaking intergalactic law by attacking this station," he said coolly. "Step down now, and perhaps we can." The warrior nearest to him moved faster than John could blink, one swift motion, and Ralvik was slammed against the wall, a glowing blade hovering just inches from his throat. John's stomach turned to ice. This wasn't a negotiation. These people had one goal: take Zyra, or kill her. Zyra stepped forward, her glowing tattoos pulsing, her gaze locked onto the leader. "You don't understand," she said. "The bond has already begun." The warriors hesitated. For the first time, their calm confidence wavered. The leader turned their masked face toward John. "Then we end it." John felt his pulse spike. "Whoa, wait. What does that mean?" Zyra inhaled sharply. "They're going to kill you." John's chest tightened. "Oh, great. Wait. John raised his hands. "Let's all just take a deep breath and talk like civilized." The warrior nearest to him lunged. John dodged on pure instinct, throwing himself to the side just as the blade sliced through the air where his throat had been. He hit the ground hard, rolling to avoid a second attack. His heart pounded like a drum, adrenaline surging through his veins. He was so dead. Then, a sudden pulse of energy exploded through the room. John felt heat flood his chest, and for a split second, his vision blurred again, just like before. But this time, it wasn't Zyra's memories he saw. It was something new. He could feel her fear, her anger, her desperation. And then, power. Not his own, hers. John's hands burned with heat, but instead of pain, it felt right, like something inside him was waking up. The warrior who had lunged at him froze mid-strike. Their body jerked, their weapon trembling in their hand. Zyra's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "He is bound to me now. If you harm him, you harm me." The warriors all stiffened. Their leader tilted their head, studying John carefully. "That cannot be." Zyra straightened, her tattoos blazing with golden light. "It is." John had no idea what was happening, but whatever it was keeping him alive. For now, the warriors exchanged glances, their once unshakable confidence cracking. One of them whispered something in their native tongue. Then the leader stepped back, lowering their weapon. John let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The leader's voice was calm but deadly serious. "Then the decision is no longer ours." They turned to Zyra. "You must choose." Zyra's hands trembled slightly. "Choose." The warrior's gaze darkened. "Come with us willingly. Return to our people. Break the bond before it is too late." A heavy pause. Zyra swallowed hard. "And if I refuse?" The leader's golden eyes flashed. "Then we will hunt you for the rest of your days." Silence. The weight of the moment settled like a heavy stone in John's chest. This was it. Zyra turned to look at him. John's breath caught. For the first time since this started, he saw something new in her eyes. Not just fear, not just confusion, but resolve. She turned back to the warriors. And then, in a steady voice, she said, "I choose him." John's heart slammed against his ribs. The warriors went completely still. Ralvik muttered under his breath, "Well, that complicates things." The leader exhaled slowly, then raised their weapon again, not at Zira, but at John. "So be it," they said. And then the room exploded into chaos. The consequence? The room erupted into chaos. John barely had time to react before the warriors lunged forward, their glowing blades slashing through the air. He had no weapon, no training, nothing but raw instinct, but something inside him had changed. The moment Zara had chosen him, something had clicked inside his body. He felt stronger, faster, more aware, as if his senses had been dialed up to maximum. A warrior swung at his throat. John dodged without thinking, his body moving before his brain could catch up. He felt the energy in his veins, felt Zara's presence inside him like a second heartbeat. And then, his hands lit up. A sudden pulse of golden light surged from his palms, meeting the warrior's blade mid-swing. The energy clashed, sending a shockwave through the room. John stumbled backward, eyes wide. What the hell was that? Zira, still glowing, turned to him. The bond. It's reacting. John's mind spun. "You mean I have?" "Yes." John barely had time to process it before another warrior attacked. This time, Zira moved first. She broke free from her restraints as if they were nothing, her tattoos blazing with light. She moved like liquid, twisting around the attacker and slamming a glowing hand against his chest. The warrior flew backward, hitting the wall with a sickening crack. John exhaled sharply. Holy shit. Ralvik, still pinned against the wall by another warrior, smirked. Well, that's new. Another attack came, two warriors charging at once. Zira grabbed John's wrist, her fingers hot against his skin. "Move with me." "What?" She didn't wait for him to understand. She pulled him forward, and suddenly, their movements sensed. John felt his body reacting to hers, his steps mirroring hers as if they had trained together for years. Their bond wasn't just emotional, it was physical. A warrior lunged at John, blade aimed for his heart. John didn't hesitate. He raised his hand, and without thinking, a wave of golden light exploded from his palm. The warrior screamed, flying backward as the energy slammed into him. John's eyes widened. Oh, hell yeah. Zara turned to him, breathing heavily. "You're adapting fast." John let out a nervous chuckle. "Yeah, well, I'd rather not die. So." A warrior rushed Ralvik, aiming to finish him off. Without hesitation, John threw out his hand again, another burst of golden energy flying toward the attacker. The warrior was knocked off balance, and in that moment, Ralvik grabbed his own weapon and delivered a precise counterstrike. The warrior crumpled to the ground. Ralvik exhaled, dusting himself off. "Remind me to give you a job in security." John grinned. "I'll think about it." Zira suddenly tensed. John felt it through the bond. A wave of cold fear. The leader of the warriors, the one who had threatened them, was still standing, unmoved, and he was staring directly at Zira. "You made your choice," the leader said calmly. Then he raised his weapon and struck. John didn't see the attack. He only saw Zira's expression change, her eyes widening in shock. Then, pain. Blinding, searing, unbearable pain. Not his. Hers. John felt it through the bond, felt the blade tear through her side. He gasped, his own chest burning even though he wasn't wounded. Zira staggered, her glowing tattoos flickering wildly. "No." John lunged toward her, catching her before she collapsed. Blood, deep blue, almost glowing, spread across her uniform. John's mind screamed. Zira looked up at him, her breathing uneven. "John." He held her close, panic rising in his chest. "Stay with me." The warrior leader tilted his head slightly. "She will live," he said, "but she is weakened. And so are you." John felt it, the pain in his chest, the way his own strength had suddenly dimmed. The bond meant they shared pain. Ralvik took a step forward, weapon raised. "I strongly suggest you reconsider this fight," he told the leader. The leader studied John and Zyra for a long moment. Then, without a word, he lowered his weapon. John blinked. "That's it." The leader's golden eyes locked onto his. "The bond is incomplete," he said. "You still have a choice." John gritted his teeth. "What the hell does that mean?" "If you break the bond now, she will survive. You will return to your human life, untouched." John froze. Zyra tensed in his arms. Ralvik's expression darkened. "And if he refuses?" The warrior leader's voice was calm, unshaken. "Then the bond will complete, and neither of them will ever belong to their own kind again." Silence. John's mind raced. Break the bond, go back to normal, or keep it and become something else entirely. Zyra looked up at him, her glowing eyes filled with something unspoken. He had a choice, and he had seconds to make it. The station shook again, another explosion rocking the walls. The warriors stood still, waiting. Ralvik exhaled sharply. "Well, kid." John clenched his jaw. His mind screamed at him to walk away. But when he looked at Zyra, when he felt her through the bond, he knew the answer. He wasn't walking away. He took a deep breath, looking directly at the warrior leader. And he said, "I choose her." Zyra gasped. The leader stared. And then, the bond sealed. A massive pulse of golden light exploded outward, shaking the entire station. John felt it, the final connection snapping into place, the flood of Zyra's presence merging completely with his. They were one now. No turning back. The warriors stepped back in unison, as if sensing the change. The leader gave one slow nod. "You have made your choice." Then, without another word, the warriors vanished, disappearing into the shadows like ghosts. The room fell silent. John stared at Zyra, his chest still burning. She looked back at him, wide-eyed, breathing shakily. And then, in a soft, trembling voice, she whispered, "John, what have we done? Escape or capture?" The golden light faded, leaving only the sound of John's heavy breathing and the distant rumble of explosions shaking the space station. He could still feel the warmth of the energy that had passed through him, the final snap of the bond locking into place. He wasn't the same anymore. Neither was Zyra. She lay in his arms, her body trembling, her glowing tattoos shifting and pulsing like living patterns. Her deep blue blood stained his hands, and yet through the bond, he could feel her heart still beating strong. John swallowed hard. Zyra. Her black eyes fluttered open, and the golden rings now permanently etched into them shimmered as they locked onto his. She took a shaky breath. "John, you sealed it." John felt a deep pull inside him, as if something unbreakable now tied them together. He helped her sit up, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "Yeah, I did." A part of him still couldn't believe it. He could feel her presence in his mind now, like a second heartbeat. When he focused, he could feel her emotions, a strange mix of pain, relief, and something else, something that felt like awe. But there was no time to process it, because the station was still under attack. Ralvik, still gripping his weapon, let out a sharp breath. Well, that was a hell of a thing to witness. He adjusted his uniform and glanced toward the still smoking hole in the interrogation room's wall. "But if you two are done bonding, we should probably start running." John blinked, his mind still lagging behind the chaos. "What do you mean?" Ralvik tilted his head toward the red emergency lights flashing overhead. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe the multiple explosions happening across the station. Or the fact that the moment you two did your little light show, every damn scanner in this sector probably picked up an energy spike the size of a nuclear blast. John tensed. He hadn't even thought about that. Ralvik grinned dryly. Congratulations, kid. You just painted a giant target on your back. Zira's breathing was still uneven, but she managed to lift her head. He's right. John turned to her. About what? She hesitated, then said something that made his stomach drop. They'll keep coming. John's blood ran cold. You mean your people? She nodded weakly. The bond is forbidden. The moment they sensed its completion, they sent a message to the High Council. John felt a chill creep down his spine. And what does the High Council do to people who break their rules? Zira looked at him silently. She didn't have to say it. John already knew. Fantastic, he muttered, rubbing his face. Ralvik glanced at him. If I were you, I'd stop thinking about how bad this is and start thinking about how to get off this station before it's too late. John looked at him. You have a way out. Ralvik smirked. I always have a way out. Another explosion rocked the station, and the emergency lights flickered. The sound of heavy boots echoed down the hallway outside. Ralvik's smirk disappeared. And it looks like we're out of time. The chase begins. The doors to the interrogation room slammed open. John barely had time to react before station security stormed in, weapons raised. Hands up, one of them shouted. Ralvik sighed. Really? That's your reaction to this situation? The lead officer's grip on his weapon didn't waver. Commander Ralvik, step away from the fugitives. John froze. Wait. Fugitives. Ralvik's smirk returned. You know, I was wondering how long it would take before someone decided I was on the wrong side of this. John clenched his fists. They're not here to help us, are they? Nope. The lead officer's voice was cold. John Carter, Zira of the Relian Empire. You are under arrest for unlawful energy manipulation and violation of intergalactic treaties. John let out a sharp laugh. Oh, come on. I didn't even know what I was doing 5 minutes ago. The officer's glare didn't waver. You'll have a chance to explain to the tribunal. John's gut twisted. He didn't know much about space station law, but he knew one thing. If they ended up in a tribunal, they were screwed. Zira suddenly gripped his arm. John felt a rush of determination flood through the bond. Then her voice echoed in his mind. We can't let them take us. John's heart pounded. He didn't know how it worked, but somehow he understood her. Without another word, she moved. Faster than he thought possible, Zira threw out her hand. A wave of golden energy exploded outward, knocking the officers back. John barely had time to react before she grabbed his hand and ran. Ralvik let out a low whistle. Now that's an exit. Then he bolted after them. The escape plan. The station was in chaos. Screams echoed through the corridors as security forces clashed with the remaining Relian warriors, their glowing weapons clashing in bursts of blue and gold. The air smelled like burning metal and ozone. John ran as fast as he could, Zira's grip tight on his wrist. He didn't know where they were going, but somehow she did. Through the bond, he could feel her urgency, her determination. She was leading him to an escape route. Ralvik ran beside them, grinning despite the danger. This is definitely the most fun I have had all year. John shot him a look. Are you always like this? Ralvik chuckled. Only on weekdays. They turned a corner and ran straight into a blockade of security forces. John skidded to a stop. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. The officers raised their weapons. Surrender now. John's fists clenched. But then, Zira stepped forward. Her golden tattoos flared bright, and when she spoke, her voice carried an undeniable force. You will let us pass. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the officers hesitated. Their grips on their weapons wavered. John felt his jaw drop. Wait, did you just? Zira turned to him, eyes still glowing. The bond has given us more than just a connection. John swallowed. You mean I can do that too? Zira smirked. The officers suddenly snapped out of their trance, shaking their heads. Ralvik groaned. Oh great, you had to talk. Then, all hell broke loose. John felt power surge through him, his body moving instinctively, no longer just human, but something else entirely. Zira beside him, the bond alive between them. No turning back now. They weren't escaping. They were becoming something new. And the galaxy, it was not ready for them.